All right, now, today is Christ the King Sunday. It's the end of Luke, the end of Luke. Now, what do we do with all this material? First of all, who is Jesus? He's 100% God, 100% man. What is the gospel? The gospel is the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. Notice, the gospel is not give stuff to needy people or do social work or something. That's not the gospel. The gospel is the death, burial, resurrection of Christ. And what did he come to do? He didn't come on earth to tell us a bunch of nice parables. Remember there are excellent parables in Luke? He didn't come to earth to heal people, even to walk on the water. No, that's not why he's here. He didn't come here to give us things like the Sermon on the Plain. You know, in the Gospel of Matthew, the Sermon on the Mount, Gospel of Luke, Sermon on the Plain, turn the other cheek, you know, the golden rule. That's all good stuff. We like that, right? There are many religious teachers that have given us profound philosophical insights. That's not why Jesus is here. Why did he come? He came for this one reading tonight. This is why he's here. So it's fitting that at the end of 51 weeks in a row of Luke, all of a sudden tonight, we're doing this lesson tonight. It's like, oh, shouldn't this be read on Good Friday? No, it should be read tonight on Christ the King Sunday, so you will not be mistaken and think that, oh, no, the Christian religion is not about a cross with a man hanging on the cross. Oh, no, that's no good. No, take this away. We don't want that. That's depressing. You ever watch Joel Osteen, Kanye West is a Christian now, and they have the huge auditorium. And notice, there's no cross visible in the entire place. Isn't that interesting? Why? Because it's entertainment. They don't talk about things like this, and as a result, maybe I'm a cynic, but I think they're missing the whole point of the Christian religion, aren't they? So what is the Christian religion? This is the Christian religion. A man on a cross. For God so loved the world. That's you. He sent his own son to do what? Die on the cross for your sins? That's the gospel. So let's look at this lesson tonight with some reverence and follow along as we go through this thing. This is an expository sermon. When they came to the place which is called the skull. What place is this? It's called the skull. Other gospels, like Matthew, because he's writing for Jewish people, Jewish readers, Jewish Christians, it's called Golgotha, which is Aramaic. It means the place of the skull. Luke is writing for Greek people and Roman people that are well informed, you know, living in Asia Minor, and so it's called the cranium place, the cranium, place of the skull. Okay, so this is the name of the place. Now stop for a minute. Why is it called the place of the skull? Isn't that an odd thing?
Everybody was the crucified people, and all the bones were there.
Are you sure? Yeah. This is in Eastern Orthodoxy, you know, they have icons. I should have an icon up here. An icon is for illiterate people. You look at the picture and you get the whole story in one image. So Jesus is on the cross, and there's a hill, right? And right below there's a cavity, a cave underneath the cross, and there's a skull in the cave. Well, what is that skull? It's the burial place of Adam. So here you have the skull of Adam, and he's the first Adam who did what? He failed to do the will of the Father. Then you have Jesus, the second Adam, who perfectly fulfills the will of the Father, and these 2 points come together into one image. I don't know if it really was the place where Adam's skull is, but you know what? It's such a powerful image that you can't get it out of your mind. So I love that idea of the skull of Adam is buried there. It connects the beginning of the gospel, beginning of the Bible to the end of the Bible. So it's called the place of the skull. Some people also call it the place of the skull, perhaps because it was a place of regular execution. Outside the city wall, remember, what is crucifixion? A public degradation ritual. I talk to my college students at the CAA about, history, and sometimes some execution will come up or something, and people will say, I'm against capital punishment because it doesn't deter crime, right? Well, yeah, because we don't do it right? The Romans do it the right way. We have it as a sterile procedure, like you're getting a tooth extracted or something. I love it when they, give the person death by lethal injection, and they put an alcohol swab on there so that it doesn't get infected as they stick the needle in. It's like, use the rusty needle, it won't matter, right? So what do the Romans do? They take the victim and they beat them, scourge them almost to death, and then they drive you through the city streets the long way, Via Dolorosa, right? The parade through the street, and it gives an opportunity for the public to render their opinion of you personally. And by the time you get to the spot outside the city wall, right by the intersection, today this would be at the Rotary over in Kingston, you know, where everybody has to go to get on the thruway. That's where they do it, so everybody can see a victim in the Roman Empire hanging on the cross. It's like a billboard. It's state terrorism. And what's the moral of the story? Don't ever think of violating one of our Roman laws, because if you do, that could be you. You want to end up like that? Go ahead, violate our laws, right? That's what it's for. It's a public degradation ritual. It's not enough just to kill you. Oh no, they have to annihilate your name and your memory. That's what they're up to here, right? And a lot of the beating occurs in the face, so your face is not even recognizable, right? So they're trying to eradicate you as if you never existed at all. And it's called the place of the skull. We know about Joseph of Arimathea, that great hero, a member of the Sanhedrin, who is a high-ranking person in Jerusalem. He goes to Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, and begs for the body of Jesus. And he takes down the body of Jesus in a loving way and places him in a rich man's tomb. That's unusual. Generally, when the Romans crucify somebody, they leave him there. And when the person dies, Josephus says that there are crucifixion victims that lived up to 9 days on the cross. 9 days. And when they die, they just leave them there. And the body just rots away, the crows, have a feast, and the bones end up falling on the ground. So when they say place of the skull, this is a place, it's a bone pile, right? With thousands of victims probably, left there, And so it's called the place of the skull. It's a well-known place. So when you say the place of the skull outside of Jerusalem, everybody knows this horrific place, the killing field. And there, what do? They crucify Jesus with the criminals, one on the right and one on the left. Stop, stop, and stop. What does Luke do? He doesn't get into great detail describing the mechanics of crucifixion. We want to know. We want to know. Where was the trial of Jesus held? We want to know how long the procession was. We want to know, we want to know every possible detail. Instead, Luke just says, there they crucified him, that's it. He doesn't dwell on it. Why is that? You've heard of George Carlin before, right? Pretty funny guy. Remember his famous skit? Don't say it. The 7 words you can't say on the radio. You remember that, right? Yeah, Mike knows. Yeah, he knows this very well, right? Well, in the Roman Empire, they have an 8th word. It's a curse word. What is the word? Crucifixion. It's such a horrible, horrible thing that they don't say it in polite company. It's a swear word in the Roman Empire. That's how horrible this is. So when Luke says they crucified him, it's a swear word. He just leaves it. He doesn't fill in the details. Because if you're living in the Roman Empire, it's a common form of execution for slaves and for non-Roman citizens. Why is it good to be a Roman citizen? Well, because you have the privilege of being beheaded if you're going to be executed, not crucified. Believe me, you don't want to be crucified. See? So it's a swear word. He's crucified there with the criminals, one on the left and one on the right. Do you remember the story of James and John? Yeah, I remember now. James and Johnny's mother come up to Jesus and said, Jesus, when you come into your kingdom, can my boys sit on the right and left-hand side of you? And what does Jesus say? Woman, you don't know what you're asking for. Because when Jesus comes into his kingdom, his throne is the cross. You're asking for your boys to be one on the right and one on the left. See what this means? And who's on the right and on the left? 2 criminals. What are their names? We don't know their names. They're anonymous, right? These are criminals and people that have gone astray down throughout the centuries. They're all there, right? In church tradition, the one man on the cross is named Saint Decimus, right? They give him a name in strong church tradition, right? So we'll get to him in a little bit, but they're anonymous people on the cross. And Jesus says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Is that sort of, we know many famous sayings of Jesus, but this is probably one at the top of the list. Do we ever say this when people do us wrong? No, we're from New Jersey. We say, I'll get even with you, you fill in the blank. Mike knows the 7 words, right? Do we ever say that when someone does us wrong? Do we turn the other cheek? No, we get even with them, right? Stop the car, get out of the car with a crowbar and render justice right there on the side of the road. Road rage, right? No, not Jesus. He says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And what did they do? They divided his clothing. This is amazing. There's a prophecy in Psalms that says that they will divide his clothing and gamble for them. So this is what the Romans did. An execution squad, there's 5 soldiers, usually an officer and 4 enlisted men, and they are on execution detail. It takes a long time, so there's drinking involved and gambling involved to help pass the time. You have to wait till the guy dies, right? It could take days, right? And it's their assignment to make sure that he's dead. Is that sort of important? What happens to a Roman soldier that said, we left early, we had things to do? You we executed. Romans are known for their rigorous military justice and discipline. So their assignment is to make sure that that guy is dead before you leave. That's why they spear him under the 5th rib and blood and water comes out in the Gospel of John. They want to make sure he's really dead before they leave, right? Their work is finished here. So they divide his clothes and they gamble for his clothes. Is that sort of horrific? I mean, what kind of a degenerate, you know? A policeman, he pulls over and there's, you know, some guy who killed in an accident. Well, let's gamble over his clothing before we leave. This is considered like, it's all about public degradation ritual. Humiliate the victim. Show them how worthless they are by gambling a few shekels for their clothing, making a mockery out of this thing. Rather than standing solemnly by in a respectful manner, they're partying it up and having a great time. It's Las Vegas, right? Las Vegas on Golgotha. And so they're gambling. And what's this? The people stood by and watched. You got that? What do people do? People don't get involved, they stand by and watch. That's what people do. They stand by and watch. And then what do they say? I didn't see anything. I don't know nothing. I didn't see anything. Well, you just watched it. You live here. You watched the whole thing. You don't know anything. Oh, no, we don't know anything. It's not our fault. Right? The people stood by and watched. Sometimes things don't change. Right? Some things never change. The people stood by and they watched. These are witnesses. Why is that? It's a public degradation ritual. The whole town watched it, and they stood by, and did they interfere? Did they say, wait, you can't do this. He's the Jewish Messiah. You can't kill him. No, go ahead and kill him. We'll watch. We'll stay out of it. We don't want to be involved. They stood by and they watched. And the leaders, who are the leaders? These are the Jewish religious leaders in the temple in Jerusalem. Sadducees, Pharisees, scribes, the people, the bureaucrats, the deep state in the temple. These people don't like Jesus because he comes from Nazareth in the north, 75 miles away, and he has a big following. When Jesus comes into Jerusalem, they view him not as, oh good, the Savior is here. No, he's a threat to the existing order. We have a good thing going here in the temple. We don't want this Jesus coming in and trashing the temple. We don't want him cutting off our money supply. We have it made here. So they conspire with the Romans, who they hate. Do they hate the Romans? They hate the Romans. They hate them. So they conspire with the Romans to hand over one of their own people. Jesus is a Jew. You know, in the Middle East, there's a thing where if you're running through the desert and you make it to a Bedouin tent and they take you in, they will protect you up to the point where they'll risk their entire family to hide you and protect you. Did you see them come this way? We didn't see anything. That's Middle Eastern hospitality. And so for a Bedouin or for an Arab or a person in the Middle East to hand over one of their brothers to the enemy, this is considered like the worst possible thing you could do. Well, that's what they did. the Jewish religious leaders handed over one of their own brothers to be killed in a heinous way, to be crucified by the Romans. How deep is that hate? Hate is irrational. It's crazy. It's insane. You can't reason with these people. And they wanted to get rid of him, so they conspire, and they plot, and they work, and they undermine, and they humiliate him. They try to trap him. They try to question him all the time. They're trying to, did you really say this? Did you say that? They try to humiliate him in front of his people, to strip away all of his support, to get him standing there naked with nothing, with nobody there with him. They want to isolate him. This is what they're doing. So they conspire with the Roman leaders, and they hand him over. And what do? They scoff at Jesus. The leaders scoffed. What does that mean? They're making fun of him. They say things like this: he saved others. How do they know that? Because they've been following him around for 3.5 years. Every time Jesus heals somebody or saves somebody or leads somebody to the truth of God, they make a mental note of it. Oh, he saves other people. He saves others. If he saves other, then let him save himself. If-then statements, does that sound familiar? Yeah, let me see. Jesus, at the beginning of his ministry, is in the wilderness for 40 days. There he is tempted by the devil. And what does the devil do? If you are the Son of God, turn these stones into bread. If you are the Son of God, leap from the temple. In other words, if-then statements are devil statements. Whenever you see if-then in the Bible, it's like, oh, there you go. Somebody is trying to undermine God or the work of God. If you're the Son of God, you saved others, save yourself. If he's the Messiah, see the word Messiah? That's the word Messiah. That's an Arabic Hebrew word, Aramaic Hebrew word. It means in Greek, it's Christos. So they don't call him Christ because that's Greek. They call him Messiah. That's the Aramaic word, the Hebrew word. So if he's the Messiah, if he's the chosen one, do they know about the Messiah? Yeah, because they read the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament. And what's in the Old Testament? Oh, a lot of interesting stuff, like 333 messianic prophecies. Starts with Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. The seed of the woman will crush the head of the serpent. And it goes down to 333 of those prophecies. So they know who the Messiah is. I've said this before. You could technically take the New Testament and tear it out of the Bible and throw it away and only read the New Testament, and there's enough in there that describes who Jesus is. Jesus is in the Old Testament, and they know he's in there. And that's what's so evil about this. They know who he is. They know he's the Messiah because of he fulfills the prophecies, right? No one else fulfills these prophecies. Mathematically, it's 10 to the 157th power of him fulfilling all the prophecies. There's no other person. It's like DNA testing, where it's like 6 billion to 1. It's even higher than that. That one person could fulfill all those prophecies. He's the Messiah, and they know it, and they don't care. Why? Because they don't want a Savior. They don't want a Messiah. Again, they have it made in the temple. Why do you want to ruin a good thing, Jesus, by coming along and taking away all of our money and all of our power, and everybody's saying, you're a brilliant theologian, you're wonderful? No, that'll all come to an end. So they don't want a Messiah. Who wants a Messiah? Poor people, oppressed people, people in the countryside that aren't allowed to go to the synagogue because they're too poor. They're the ones that go to the Sermon on the Mount to hear him preach. They're the ones that go to be healed. They're the ones that follow him, and big groups of people following him. They're the ones that want a Savior. The power to lead people, they don't want a Savior. They have it made already. So they mock him, and they scoff at him, right? And in doing this, who's standing around the cross? Well, the Roman soldiers are. So the Roman soldiers are worried about security because they're not from around here. And they're looking at the Jewish religious leaders scoffing this guy, and they go, oh, isn't that good? We don't have to worry about security tonight because these leaders are on our side. See, they don't have to worry about getting a knife under the 5th rib, right? So they scoff at him. The next group, the soldiers, what do? They mock him. So leaders are scoffing, the soldiers are mocking. Again, what are they doing? It's public degradation ritual. They offer him sour wine. Sour wine is the cheap wine that these execution details drink. They're standing around for like 6 hours and they drink the cheap wine that's in the bucket, you know. So they try to give some to Jesus. And then they say to him, what is it? If you are the king of the Jews, then save yourself. Got this? Then. It's another satanic statement. Now, Luke adds almost a side note. By the way, there was an inscription on the cross, right here. Right? This is why we think the cross was shaped this way, because it had the inscription above. It didn't end here. It's called a Latin cross. The inscription is up here. What does it say? This is the King of the Jews. INRI. Jesus Nazareth Rex, that's King of the Jews. Right? INRI. Jesus Nazareth, King of the Jews. That's the inscription that's on him. How did that inscription end up on there? Because it's a public degradation ritual. And who gave the order? Pontius Pilate. They crucify you. It's a billboard out on the highway, and you'd walk by and go, what did he do? The crime is on here. He called himself Jesus Nazareth Rex, King of the Jews. That's what he called himself. The inscription is on there. And so that's called irony. What do you mean? Pilate meant to be an insult. Ha 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 ha. Look at the King of the Jews. Ah, isn't that funny? They're mocking him. But the truth is, he really is the King of the Jews. In their mocking, God turns their mocking into a proclamation of what this event is really all about. God inverts it. Their evil plans are flipped and turned into something good. His death on the cross saved the whole world. He truly is the King of the Jews. Right? Very, very important. Now we're getting to the interesting part of the story. One of the criminals that was hanged there kept deriding him and said, "Are you not the King of the Jews?" And it's an if-then statement again. If you are the King of the Jews, then save yourself and us. If-then again. If-then, Satan statement. Okay? So what is this then? The leaders scoff, the soldiers mock, and the criminals ridicule him. Okay? They deride him. Well then, one of the other criminals says this. So there are two criminals, one on the left, one on the right. Do you not fear God? What's the word for fear in Greek? Phobia, theos. Phobia. Aren't you afraid of God? Since you are under the same sentence of condemnation. I mean, you're bleeding out, dude. You got a couple hours left. Don't you think maybe that's a time to maybe like get right with God? In other words, the guy is going out with curse words on his lips, mocking God, Jesus, who's hanging on the cross next to him. And so this guy is again, church tradition. He's called Saint Decimus. He's the one who says, who says this. We indeed have been condemned justly. Now, Luke doesn't get into detail explaining what their crimes are. So we think that these people are like terrorists or bandits, like Barabbas was. So what do? They rob people. They're zealots. They rob people on the highway. They assassinate Romans. They kill collaborators. They're terrorists, in other words. Okay. So this guy says, look, we deserve what we get, right? We killed people. We stole their money. We deserve what we get. But this man, he's done nothing wrong. Isn't that interesting? Sometimes there are people that are wrongly convicted and sent to prison. We have DNA testing, that exonerates them 25 years later or something. Usually, when these guys are in prison, the professional criminals that are in there know the difference. Like, if you want to know who's really guilty or not, go to prison and ask, how about that guy over there? Oh, yeah, he did it. Are you kidding? How about this one? Yeah, sure did. That one there? No, he didn't do anything wrong. He's been wrongly convicted. So the professional word is Jesus. He's pronounced not guilty. And this happens over and over again. Pilate pronounces him not guilty. Remember, he washes his hands because he caves into political. You crucify him. I don't want any part of it. He's innocent, right? I find no guilt in him. So here one of the criminals said he's done nothing wrong. Then he said, what does he say? This is the all sinners, all of us should say this. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. What a beautiful thing. And this is what Christ the King Sunday is all about. This is what it's all about. It's not about cute stories, parables, walking on the water. No, no, it's about this. Jesus, the King of Kings, remembers you when he comes into his kingdom. And Jesus replies what? Truly I tell you. Basically, St. Dismas, this guy, this is the only person that's been nice to him the entire day, that treats him respectfully and knows who he really is. The people that should know, the Jewish religious leaders, they mock him and scoff and make fun of him. The Roman soldiers, they mock him. The people in the crowd, they just stand by and don't do anything. Non-action is the same as participating in it. It means it's called the sanction of the victim. You're approving what's going on by not doing anything. And the St. Dismas is a final blessing to Jesus on earth. Think about that for a minute. Think about that. Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. This is Christ the King Sunday. And it's really important to know who he is and what he came here to do. This is the end of an entire year study of the Gospel of Luke. And it takes us to this point, to this moment in time. He dies on the cross. Remember what happens? A runner goes to Pontius Pilate, and he's a Jewish religious leader, and he says, we want to get these bodies off the cross because it's sundown, it's the Sabbath day, and we don't want to defile the city. So in other words, you just murdered somebody, but you don't want to break the technical religious laws. So they break the legs of the one on the right and the one on the left, and they come to Jesus. And who are these people? Roman soldiers, execution squad. They look at him. Do they know a dead body when they see one? Yeah, they do it for a living. They look at him, he's obviously dead. So what do? They take a spear and they puncture him under the fifth rib, and blood and water comes out. That's the death certificate. The death of Christ. He's buried by Joseph of Arimathea. He's placed in a rich man's tomb. He's there Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday morning at dawn. The stone is rolled away. He is not here, he is risen. The death, the burial, the resurrection of Christ. That's the gospel. That's why we come to church, to learn the gospel, to think about Jesus, to understand fully what this man, what this God did to save us from our sins.